Hello, welcome again to the course CS565. I hope that you have already gone through the previous lectures shared on YouTube. Um, so that actually already gives you the high level information regarding the course content as well as the course administration. Please look at mm, the weightage, the marks distribution of the course, and as you can see that there will be three assignments and projects, and that constitutes altogether 70% of the marks. And there would be few uh, exams and quizzes for the course, and that would sort of comprises of 30% weightage. In this particular lecture, we are going to I have divided into the two components. The first component talks about the defining NLP and what are the different school of thoughts which actually over the period of the time influences the progress and research in NLP. And the second component will actually talk about that why NLP is hard, and it's not only that it was hard, it's today it's still true. Um, uh, uh, and the primary reason is that there are a lot of ambiguities present at and these ambiguities are present at different levels of NLP. And while we go through this, try to understand that what are these ambiguities through some examples, we will try to also introduce the different levels of NLP and also try to understand that, or you can get a kind of a glimpse that what kind of different the basic NLP tasks are there. So let's begin by asking two questions: that what do we mean by natural language, and uh, what are the other kinds of the languages we use? So by natural language, we mean the languages that are written or spoken by humans and has evolved with repeated uses and enhancements. So any language, for example, some of you might be speaking English, Hindi, Bengali. So all of these are an examples of the natural languages. But let's try to answer the second questions. What are the other languages, other kinds of the languages we see? So one example is that as a computer science students, you have seen formal languages, and specifically that has sort of used to work with machines or the computers, and you can easily now contrast those languages with the natural languages, and you can see that uh, how I mean comparatively to make machine understands those artificially or the constructed languages. Uh, it's relatively easier to computer to understand those languages compared to the natural language. Uh, so now let's talk about that. What the NLP? What do we mean by NLP? So NLP deals with enabling computers to understand natural languages, interpret its meaning, and process it and generate uh, uh, natural language content. So the primary objective of NLP is to make machine understand the natural language close to the human level of understanding. In fact, there are several distinct fields which study human languages. Uh, the linguist has their own reason to study the language and its evolution over the period of time. The speech recognition also study the natural languages. The computational psycholinguists also try to understand that what kind of a language is being used, and its progresses and evolution. Uh, And computational linguist has their own reason to study the human language. And I sort of believe that many of these fields has to sort of come together to realize uh, the the what we call is the artificial general intelligence. It has to sort of all of many of these fields has to come together to really realize what we call is artificial general intelligence. Uh, as many areas study the human languages, there is a significant overlap of multiple aspects of the languages these areas study. And if you can, try to divide, perhaps we can divide into the three broad sub areas. So the first is the cognition. So this deals with the question of how we acquire, comprehend, and produce language content. You can, try to understand the cognitive aspect by watching that how a child starts, understanding our voice, gesture, or language. They initially try to perhaps mimic them, and then starts uttering one word over the period of time, and then they also later starts combining one or two more words, and then starts making sentences. And in fact, even before all of these things, maybe they are trying to sort of go with the one syllable, and I mean, uttering try to one syllable words, and so on. So and this whole thing is basically depends on the this our rich sensory inputs with the strong feedback mechanism, and that which go plays a crucial role in the development of the linguistic skill. The linguists, psycholinguists, speech therapists study a lot about these topics. Uh, Although this course is sort of not going to discuss these things anymore, but if some of you are interested, you can look into the Professor Roger Levy's page of the course on related to this cognition. He is associated with the Department of Brain and Cognitive Science at MIT USA. The other part, which is the natural language understanding, and in fact, this course is mm, uh, focused more on this aspect, and this is in fact the core of the NLP. It deals with making computer understand, process, and comprehend natural languages. It consists of the several layers of the operations, which we will be discussing during uh, the whole course. Uh, when we will see the different layers by when we try to discuss the different tasks of the NLP, and you will see that how these layers are coming into the picture. Uh, the natural language generation is highly interlinked with the natural language understanding, and it has to sort of apart from having the understanding of the natural language, it has the ability to generate the natural language content. And the examples of, you can say that, abstractive summarizations, where you need to generate a summary of, for example, some text. The chatbots, which are sort of very hot topic these days. So these are the very common examples where you need to have the natural language generation ability. uh, and looking at the interlinking of these natural language understanding and natural language generation. Let's look into this example where we see that you have to translate a sentence from one language to another. Here the source language in English, and the target language is Hindi. And you see that first of all, it needs to understand the word boundaries in both the source and target language. It needs to sort of understand the syntactic structure of the languages, and then should be able to translate to the appropriate words and the syntactic structure of the target language. So This, I think, uh, should give you a very high level picture that how the NLU and NLG are actually interlinked or intertwined with each other. Now, let's look into that, how the progress has happened in NLP, and in fact, the other related areas as well. So there are two broad paradigms to work with languages. Uh, and each of these paradigms has its own era of domination. But however, this course is more inclined toward the second paradigm, what we call is the empiricist paradigm. And in today's time, we can say that there is a kind of a convergence towards these two paradigms. So let's look into the rationalist paradigm first, and what is it's a kind of an objective uh, mm, under this paradigm. So rationalist actually tries to understand or tries to describe that the language models of the human mind. And when we talk about language models, what it means, I mean, when we talk about language models, you will understand perhaps much better. But what I can say here is that the language models is basically that try to describe that how you are going to generate new sentences, how you make sentences, and so on. So it tries to sort of describe that how the linguistic competence of the human has come and what we call is that the I language, the rationalist, the primary objective. uh, the rationalist is sort of very much influenced by the Noam Chomsky, which you must be familiar with in different contexts as well as in your some of your earlier courses. So what they believe is that we have some sort of an innate language faculty, which is sort of the hardwire or pre-built at perhaps our birth, primarily maybe through some genetic inheritance. So in summary, it's basically the significant part of our linguistic competence is pre-wired uh, in our brain, and it can be sort of these knowledge can be expressed or can be understood in terms of the language rules or the grammars. And on that premise, actually, the rationalists in practice focus more on the rule-based systems and defining grammar. So they believe that we can define a programmer which can explain our the language or the linguistic competence. So in fact, the initial AI systems mimicked these innate language faculty by trying to hard code a lot of these the existing knowledge and try to build a reasoning mechanism over these the rules and grammars. So initial examples of the AI systems, or you can see that the expert systems, they are primarily motivated or let's say influenced by the rationalists. Uh, and what kind of a models they use? They use the state machines, the formal rule systems, regular grammar, context-free grammar, and the reasoning mechanisms is based on the logic and the rules, logic systems. Now, on the other hand, the empiricists uh, sort of their primary objective is to look into, or their primary objective is to describe the language as it actually occurs. So they what they call is the e-language. So it is a more focused on the linguistic performance as it is being used or it is in a practice. Uh, of course, it assumes that it is affected by the memory, restrictions, and noise, etc. However, it ignores the unobservable, the mental representations, the states, and the processes. So it's a sort of, again, to summarize, it's more focused on that, what you can observe and try to sort of model the observable based on the what we are observing. Um, uh, and it's not that the empiricist completely ignores uh, some sort of the inherent cognitive ability or the pre-coded knowledge. It's just that they differ with the rationalists in their belief about such pre-coded knowledge. So they do assume the generic ability of making an association, pattern recognition, and generalizations, and with this work in tandem with our sensory inputs. So for example, again, you try to sort of see that you can again observe a child, that how when you try to explain a child that okay, certain object is a car, and then you have shown the child one example, mm, of a car model, and slowly over the time it tries to first understand the different models of the cars, and then try to realize that although they are of the different models, but then they are under the same category, can be called as a car. So that's where they're trying to make some sort of an association. They try to understand that what kind of pattern exists in that particular object, which can be called as a car, and then it tries to generalize from one model to the other models. Uh, so, in summary, that the empiricists, what actually they focus, when you talk about the empirical approach in NLP, so they are going to focus that what we observe. So, what you see here is a large collection of the text, and it takes a data-driven approaches. So, as such, it does not try to uh, exhaustively try to write the rules and the grammars, but instead it tries to sort of make a data-driven models. It does uses some sort of a common patterns in the language, but then it tries to explore and understand them in terms of the models with the help of the probabilistic or statistical learning models or machine learning models, where the objective is to tune the model parameters to learn the complicated and extensive language structure. And we are going to see plenty of them, plenty of such models during this course. So that comes to the end of the first part of this lecture, where we try to understand that what do we mean by NLP? What are the different? How the natural language differs from the artificial or the formal languages generally used while working with the machines, and uh, and the broad paradigms which has influenced the progress in NLP. So the one paradigm is called the rationalist, which more focused towards understand or explain the linguistic competence through the help of rules and the grammars, and the empiricist, which tries to sort of understand or explain the linguistic structure in a data-driven manner with the help of statistical, probabilistic, and machine learning models. So now in the next part of the talk, I'm going to talk about that. I will try to explain through some examples that why NLP is considered uh, hard.